This is my dad. I recently sat down with him to talk about how he got started in his tech career way later in life. In this video, we talk about how it took him over 20 years to learn how to code, how he managed to get his first tech job at 45, being an average programmer, if you should learn how to code just for the money, and much more. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Welcome to the first and maybe only episode of the Gundy and Son podcast. Our last video, it got a great response. You're famous now and people love you.
Well, I seem to have awakened something in people. It was just amazing. It's been over a little bit of a year since we talked.
Yeah, it's been about a year and 5 months, about a year and a half.
Yeah, you kept the COVID hair, and I
I grew it out.
It looks great. I can't.
Well, thanks.
I tried to do the COVID hair, but it looked like I had some kind of a mop or I was some kind of throwback from the Monkees or something. I don't know. That was a group. But anyway, so yeah.
I don't think you could pull it off.
I don't know, man. I thought about it, but I got such a big forehead, so.
I got a big ass forehead too. You gave me that gene.
It's an 8 head, really, if you think about it.
Definitely. The more that I look at it, the more I'm like, damn, that is a big ass forehead.
I get a lot of shine on it. Thank God for social media filters, right?
But yeah, a lot of people commented and they said, where's the dad's channel? So I had to bring you back on because you're so popular.
Yeah.
Looking back, when I first started this channel, I kind of wanted to show the average person it was possible to become a developer. And I think it can be really discouraging for 30 to 40-year-olds who recognize the emerging tech market, and then they go on YouTube, they look up how to become a developer, and they see all these young kids that started coding when they were like 15, and then they got their first programming job, in their 20s. I think it can be a little discouraging. So I think you really show people that it's possible, and I think that your background may be a little atypical. In the YouTube development space. I think your background is very typical in the overall space of people wanting to transition into tech. Does that make sense?
Most definitely. Makes perfect sense.
Before we get going, I got to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of today's video, which is Udemy. My dad is actually the one that introduced me to Udemy, and I've been using their platform since 2015. You actually recommend one of the first courses I take was a course called The Complete Web Developer Guide. You remember that?
Full stack development, you bet. You consumed it in a way that was just pretty amazing. And it was a real straightforward, easy to follow course. And in the end, you actually came up with something. You had a project that you could show. You had a body of work that you could put on display and even use, towards kind of proving that you were a developer, right? Mm-hmm. In that sense.
I sat in the basement. I worked on that course for like 40, 50 hours a week before I even had my first programming job.
I remember that.
Yeah. That course is a bit outdated now, but Udemy does have a ton of great courses to choose from. Some of the top ones I recommend are the Complete Web Developer Bootcamp by Angela Yu. If you're interested in getting in the web development space, or maybe you're interested in iOS mobile development, Angela also has a great course on that called iOS and Swift, the Complete iOS App Development Bootcamp. I'll put a couple of these courses and a couple more that I recommend in the description. So yeah, make sure to check those out. All right, so let's get going. Yeah, man. So you were 56 in our first video, which is pretty old, but now you're even older. You're 58.
58, pushing 60.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
Just a 58-year-old baby boomer, man, by the numbers.
You're like barely on the cusp of becoming a baby boomer.
1964, yeah.
1964?
Yeah.
That's when you were born?
I was born in 64, yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
So you're still going strong in the coding job?
Yeah, I'm still writing code daily.
Good.
Remote work now, right? Still, ever since the COVID, we haven't returned to the office yet. That's still kind of in flux. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, writing code every day.
So you're a senior developer now?
Senior developer, that's right.
You, I guess you got that promotion when?
I got the senior development promotion, I think around 2017, 2018, maybe around then.
So like mid-50s.
Yeah, mid-50s.
That's
Yeah.
what's up. That's dope. Yeah, I mean, let's quickly go over your background. Let's give a little recap. I didn't want to give a recap, but you said every great TV show always has a recap.
Yeah, right.
We
We can't click the skip recap button.
yeah.
Again, born in 64, I went to school in the 80s, right? And I went to college. I did the regular coursework, and it was really hard, and studied a lot and didn't do good on the tests. But I came across a programming class is what they called it, and it was just basic programming, and it really hooked me. I got into it, and I did really well. I found out if I went to the computer labs, back then you went to a computer lab and you walked into a room, and it was a whole bizarre. That's a whole different conversation. But
in the 80s.
Yeah, you didn't do it at home. You went to the computer lab, man. You had to go in anyway, and you had to do the hours or whatever. And I learned how to code. It was awesome, man. I mean, if the term nerd was just kind of catching on. It wasn't a cool thing back then, as cool as it is now. But
Yeah.
in my mind, it's always been cool. But
You got your first program job when you were 45, but you're
Yeah.
saying in the 80s, you started learning how to code.
I did.
So let's back it up a little bit.
Okay.
You graduated high school.
Yeah.
You did pretty poorly in high school.
I got a 2.0. I just wanted to get out of high school. I wasn't one of the pretty people, or I wasn't an athlete, and I didn't have a lot of money, man, So I fell in, I was that in that crowd, and there wasn't a term for nerd. Maybe there was in the 80s, all right? But anyway, that's kind of what I was. So I just wanted to get the hell out of high school, And then I went to community college because I had to do something, because everybody was like, so what are you going to do now? And I was like, I don't know, but I just said, I'm going to community college because it worked, right?
Yeah.
So I went to community college.
You know what? When I graduated high school, I went to community college too, and people always ask me the same thing. They're like, "What are you doing now?" And I would always say, "Oh, I'm going to community college." And their first response was like, "Oh, that's great. You'll save a lot of money." Like some fucking backhanded compliment.
Right. Yeah. You'll save a lot of money. That's a great start. I mean, come on,
But it is, man. I mean, I started in community college and I transferred to university, but all my community college professors were so much better.
They were better. They were more engaged. They were real.
Yeah.
I went from community college to a big university. Back in the day when I'd hang out, I would be at the clubs and people would be like, "Where are you going to school?" And I would say a university, right? I would say a university, but I was going to a
Michigan State University.
Yeah, well, I was saying I go to Michigan State, but really I went to community college. People were like, "Oh yeah, well what dorm or class?" I was like, you want a beer? I didn't. But anyway, I finally did make it to Michigan State, right? And I remember walking to class. It was just so big, and you didn't get the close interaction.
Yeah, man.
So, and it costs a lot more money.
Yes.
Yeah,
and you did this in the 80s.
It was in the 80s,
80s
man.
and 90s?
The 80s and 90s, yeah.
Okay.
It was a kind of a slow burn to college, I enjoyed myself. I like to get out and about and hang out and, that kind of thing. And, for me to do 15 hours of credit just was too much. I wanted to hang out, enjoy myself. So I did that. So it's kind of, I picked away at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so you kind of took it easy while going to college. Like you did it part-time.
Yeah, I did it part-time and
Gotcha.
I worked full-time too.
Yeah.
And you had to go during the set hours. So I had a job during the day.
Yep.
So you had to make the set hours.
Okay, so you started in the 80s. You did bad in high school. You went into community college.
Yep.
You were kind of an average student in community college, and then you took your first programming class.
That's right.
Okay, how'd you get into that programming
Well,
class?
I was dating a girl, and she mentioned, well, I'm taking this class, and it was an elective, right? And I was like, okay, cool, I'll take it, because I need an elective. I was trying to do the math, the science, the Western Civ, all the chemistry, that kind of thing, right? To get the 4-year degree.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it was a struggle for me. I did maybe a 3.0, but it was work. The programming was different. I picked it right up. I would go to the computer lab, like I said. Back then, you had to go through set hours. You had to go into this lab, and there was a bunch of people, a bunch of nerds writing code, which was super cool. And there were people there that would help you, right? I put the time in there, and it didn't feel like work. It felt kind of like a video game because it was fun. It really was. I enjoyed it. It was really cool. It intrigued me. And I found myself, time would run out, where before I was like, gosh, this is taking so long. I want to get out of here. You watch the clock and it goes backward. I would look at the clock and I needed more time to write my code, right? And then when it came to the tests, I got an A. I didn't even have to study because I knew the code.
You're just good at coding from the beginning.
Yeah, man, it hooked me. I wanted to do it, I needed more time to do it. Like my first 40-hour-a-week job, I was like, oh my God, how can people work 8 hours a day? This is hell. But the coding, then I realized at some point, like in my heart, that if I could just write code 8 hours a day, I'd be good and get paid for it.
Yeah, so you had that realization in the 80s.
Did.
You had that realization in the 80s. You went to college, but you eventually stopped going to college to work full time.
Yes. So there's one key thing about the 80s. Let me make a point. In the 80s, it was called data processing, which is different than what we do now, obviously.
That's what your dad did.
Yes. Yes, it was very lucrative, and really all you needed is a 2-year degree, and you could start and make decent money. For me, though, at the time, I wanted a 4-year degree. I wanted to be a computer scientist, right? But that was chemistry, math, calculus. Those were the harder things. So I said, hey, that's great. I kind of saw this as a hobby, and even to some degree, desktop computing and these kind of things were actually called hobbies in the 80s. They didn't take it as serious, obviously, as it is now. So I wanted to get this bigger degree. So that meant university and then pick away at it. And then, I did. I worked full time. And then I actually started having kids at 21. I started to have family. And that obviously took time. And then I got full-time jobs in sales and then that kind of thing. And it kind of drifted. But I always missed the technical part of it, the coding. So I basically stopped writing code in 1986 and didn't pick it up again till 2000. I mean, I missed the main freaking breakthrough time, which is bizarre. But anyway, what are you gonna do?
Well, that's life, man. I mean,
that is life.
Shit happens. Yeah, you got started with coding because you took a couple classes at college, but you didn't really go at it to the extent of working hard enough to get a full-time job or becoming a computer scientist, because you had a family and you ended up dropping out and you went into sales and started working full-time.
That's correct.
So you didn't pick up coding again until when?
Till 2000.
So that was like a 14-year gap?
Yeah. In 2000, I decided I had a little extra time and I'd go back and I'd start relearning coding again because, at that point I'd been in the mortgage business and I started to kind of think that, hey, and it was kind of fickle. You would change jobs a lot. So I was like, let me go back and see if I can learn this coding because it's starting to pick up. This is 2000, right? This is when 56K modems just started to kick off. And here's why I did that. Because at my jobs, that is these sales jobs or whatever I used to do, I ended up picking up the tech again. I understood how it worked. I knew how to connect the modem. I understood how the computer worked because I had seen it. But now we had a network, right? We went from the sneaker net, floppy disk, right? Put your floppy in, to actually being on the internet. And with the 56K, things started to move along. And then shortly after that, you had DSL and cable. So now you're in a faster environment. And that's where, you had the internet and you could learn and this kind of thing. So that's kind of where I picked up around 2000.
That was around the time of the dot-com bubble, right?
That's what they say.
I don't even know what that means.
I honestly don't either because I checked out between 80 and 2000, right?
Yeah. Okay, so you recognize the emerging tech market. So
That's
you went back
correct.
to school in 2000.
Yep.
But then you kind of quit that again, and you didn't really go full speed ahead on that until 2004.
There was a resurgence, right?
Yeah.
There was a resurgence in the mortgage industry, and that's where I worked, okay? Mm-hmm. And from 2000 to 2008, I worked for companies and made good money, and worked long, stressful hours, okay? That's just was the nature of the business. It really wasn't until about 2006, okay, when the bottom really kind of started to fall out altogether. That is, I finally lost my last job and was given a severance and said, see ya. And thank God my wife, your mother, had a job and could support the family. And at that point, I went back to college to get my degree in information technology. Okay, and that's when I started to code. And then I graduated in 2008, got a job teaching, and then I got my first development job in 2009.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. So from the time you first picked up coding in the 80s, it took basically 20 years for you to get absolutely serious about it and study enough to get your first full-time programming job?
That's my story. My dry time is slow.
I think it's important to show people that it took you 20 years to get serious about it, just because I know when people try to start something new, they'll give up, right? They'll take a break, they'll start, they'll give up, they'll take a break, right? And years go by, and then they beat themselves up. They're like, man, I should have really started going hard on that like 3-4 years ago. It took you 20 years to finally do it, and you did. So, there's hope, I guess. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like I said before, it's all perfect. You never give up on your dreams. That little still quiet voice inside of you that says, you know what? I'd be really good at that. You got to listen to that. And that's what it was for me. And fortunate enough, something happened. The mortgage business basically shut down in 2008.
It forced your hand.
It did, and that worked better for me because it made the decision, it made a decision for me. And that's been kind of, when something happens, it's like make lemon, not a lemonade.
Yeah, man. There's a term for it, actually. I can't remember the exact term. I'll have to look it up. But basically, there's a couple different states of how things can transform. You can have like a glass jar, and you drop it and it breaks, and that glass jar is just fucked. It's broken forever. But with humans, they can go through hard time. They can mentally break down, but they have this ability to kind of transform into a better person because of it.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. The worst thing you can do at a casino is win.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So you take that, and your hardship and your suffering end up being your key to your dream. That's it. The suffering is the grace. I'm stealing that from somebody, but that's the truth, and that's been my experience. Okay.
Yeah, man.
In the moment though, when I was broke and didn't have a job, okay, and struggling to pay the bills and trying to go to college, and my wife was paying all the bills, and I had kids, and I had to make sacrifices. Okay, I had to do that. That had to happen. I had to give up on playing with you, doing stuff with you, right? And going on and having really extra money to do that, because I had to get student loans, go to college, and put the work in and study to reinvent myself. But you know what? I remember the pressure and the stress of those sales jobs, and I remember that voice always telling me, you could do something else. You don't have to do this. And that kept me going. And I just went day to day, man. And you know what? I showed up and other people showed up. Other human beings, other souls, man, worked with me and were in my classes, and I created bonds. And it was great, man. And it was just kind of like this. It was something you were stoked about doing, and you did it. And you did it with other people, man, and then it just blossomed.
So you were working a job in the mortgage industry. It paid a lot of money, but you didn't like it that much.
No.
But it was kind of like golden handcuffs in a way.
I had a prescription for Valium.
Did you really?
Yeah, man.
Jesus.
The side of my head would get hot, and my left arm would get like, it was adrenaline. I went to the doctor, and I was like, geez, am I having a heart attack? He's like, no, it's just adrenaline. But it was a great deal of stress because it was money, and time. And I was connected to other people's money. And my part of the job was to kind of get the thing done, right? Get the check, to get the goose to lay the golden egg. So it's a lot of pressure.
Okay.
And back then there was a lot of competition. So yeah, I made a lot of money, but I had a volume prescription to keep my nerves down. It wasn't like I was taking them, banging them every day, but I used them because I needed it sometimes.
Yeah. So it was a blessing that you got fired. You got laid off.
My peace of mind and my serenity is number one, and you have to find a balance in life. And that was a time where it was great. Oh, you make good money, but it was killing me, man. At the end of the day, what's it all worth? Yeah. The disdain for the job I had was enough to keep me going to reinvent myself.
Once that kind of put the nail in the coffin of, okay, I'm gonna, like, what do I have to lose now?
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And here's the deal. In this economy, the mortgage business is back in the black, man. It's happening. So I could.
What does that mean?
It means there are people doing what I used to do are making a killing.
Right now in 2022?
Woo, yeah. They're making it's a resurgence.
Okay.
So if I would have taken my big experience, right, and rode the wave, I could potentially be right back in it. Thank God I'm not. because during the downtime, during when it wasn't, I reinvented myself to follow my dream and to keep my peace of mind and serenity. And it's worked so far.
Yeah, you turned a curse into a blessing.
That's right. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not like I'm on cloud nine and go, oh, I get to code. It's Monday.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a job, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, I think it's important to kind of set the expectation. A lot of people glorify coding jobs, and when I thought about it, getting a job in tech, I thought all my problems would be solved. Like, I'd have the tech job with the ping pong table and the free meals every day and the snacks and everything. And I got it, and it is a blessing. Like, I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah.
But it is just a job at the end of the day. You got to show up. You got to go to meetings that, maybe you're not super enthusiastic about. You do got to make a sacrifice.
Right. You got to do the work.
You got to do the work.
You got to do the work. And at the end of the day, the reality of it is you're working on a project that wasn't your conception. It's not what you wanted to do, right? It's someone else's idea of what needs to be done. Okay? And it may not hook you in the same way. It's a business thing, right? I mean, there's an idea in software. There's like, create something cool, right? Or do you need something that's definite and defined? Do you need it to do this thing, Or can you just write some code and make it cool and we'll make money off it? Where I work, we need this thing done, right? There's an expectation. There's a term for it, but I forgot what it is. Anyway, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, there's deadlines and expectations that you have to meet. It's not
right.
Yeah, when I first got into coding, in my head I was like, I'm gonna make the next big app. I'm gonna build a startup idea and make really cool shit.
Yeah.
I realized I don't have that many great ideas, or the ideas that I do, they've already been made. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a term. It's your software has to be predictable, right? It has to do this thing, right? Or take your creativity and go crazy with a team and make something that's super cool that'll make money. There's two sides of software, right? That the side that's predictable is the side I'm on. And when you do that, the creativity, the thing that hooked you into wanting to do the software because, wow, this is great and you get creative, that's a little curtailed. But at the end of the day, you're providing a service that you get paid for.
Yeah, it's a trade-off.
That's right. That's right.
I wouldn't want to do any other job, to be honest, because it satisfies like my mind, like solving problems. It puts me into like a flow state.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Sometimes I got to go to meetings I don't like, and I'm not working on my vision. But you can still, you recognize those trade-offs, and you recognize that at the end of the day, it's a really cushiony job, man. I get to sit down at a desk. I get to work from home. I have access to my fridge all day. I get to talk to really smart people. I get to learn a lot. Yeah. And there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. I mean, I remember working minimum wage jobs from ages 17 to 20. I'm very grateful for those jobs because they built a lot of character in me. I had to deal with like asshole managers. I was under a really rigid schedule. If I showed up a minute late, I'd be written up. It gave me the drive. It made me recognize like, okay, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to learn a valuable skill. That valuable skill is tech. Those crappy circumstances made me realize that I wanted to do something more fulfilling. And coding has been that outlet for me. It's been more fulfilling. Like, I hated my managers back then, but, I'm really grateful for them because they showed me that I don't want to work for people like you the rest of my life.
I mean, same experience. I won't belabor it, but essentially what you described, put about 10 more years of that kind of thing on top of it. And the reality is those folks, there's pressure on them to deliver. But yeah, you take that and then you take your desire and then you find an extra gear basically, and you sacrifice your personal time and your free time and part of your family life, as long as you've got that kind of support, and you make it work.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue into what we should talk about next, which is when you finally pulled the trigger on going back to school. You were in your 40s. You had kids and you had a wife. You had a lot to balance. How'd you balance that?
Let me just start by saying this. Here's the thing. It's not like I said, well, I'm going to go back and learn how to be a programmer, so I'm going to make all these sacrifices. I had a burning desire and a knowing on the inside that I could, in fact, change my life. I knew it, okay? And how did I know it? I saw other people doing it. And I looked at them and I said, Jesus, if they can do it, I see this guy, I talk to this guy or girl or person or whatever, and I see that they're making good money and they communicate and they behave in a certain way, and really they're no different than me. What's the difference? They did the work. I had the passion to go back and do it. And I'll just say, if you don't have the passion to do something and you're just doing it for the money, find out what you're passionate about, forget about the money, and go after it, okay? Money helps, okay? It just so happened, the reality was, I knew for 8 hours a day I could write code, okay? And I could make money doing it. So I did it, and I had that passion. So before you make that step, you got to ask yourself, is this what I really want to do? It might not be programming. It might be, making sailboats, or who knows?
Yeah, I think that's great, but do you think that passion was, I guess, lit under you, knowing that you had kids and a wife? Like, basically you had to bring in money to pay the bills?
That was there. But I'm going to tell you something. Beneath that, I'm a firm believer that first you got to love yourself. You got to be true to yourself, because if you can't love yourself, I don't think you can really love anybody else. That's my opinion, okay? And what that means is, okay, I had to tell myself that I had to really dig down and say, you know what, you can reinvent yourself, okay? And you owe it to yourself. And in doing that, my peace of mind and my serenity came back, and I generated an income, okay? And in that way, I supported my wife. But at some level, at a gut level, it was kind of a personal, selfish thing. The reality is, I would not let my wife or kids suffer. I knew that if I got a job right and being a developer, I looked at the numbers. I said, if I get a job as a developer, right, I'll get my degree in 2008. In 5 years, I'll be making X amount of dollars. So I did that math. That was there. But I saw that more as a good thing in terms of that, and it lined up with my passion. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so it was a mix of money and your passion.
Yes, well, I mean, money.
It was a good balance.
It was a great balance.
There's a hot debate in the tech world where people are like, there's two people. There's a type of person who says it's okay to get into tech if it's just for the money, and then there's the person who says you shouldn't get into tech for the money. You should do it because you enjoy it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? And where do you stand?
That's a great question. I think the answer is like anything else. It's a little of both. Okay? Yep, there's money to be made, and yep, I'm passionate about it. Win-win. Okay?
I agree.
And it's the same answer to every question where there's this or that. It's a little of both. I was passionate about it, and I needed the money. I wanted a job where I could make money, where I could do exactly what you described, where physically the effort wasn't crazy, okay? And it was enjoyable. It was a balance, okay? So I stand on both sides.
I think that's the answer.
That is the answer.
Yeah. I wouldn't do tech just for the money, but I also wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. I don't think you have to be super passionate and all you do is read coding textbooks and you're outside of work, you're always learning about code, because I don't do much of that. Honestly, I learn on the job, I work my 40 hours, and after that I'm done, man.
That's right. You don't want to be obsessive. There has to be a balance. It's kind of like if I just eat super clean and work out all the time, I get ripped and I'm jacked and I'm, just this physical specimen, but we go out and you're like, oh no, I can't eat that, or I'm this and that and the other thing. It's a little bit over the top. It's a good recipe of money and passion.
Okay.
And it becomes healthy, and it's not crazy obsessive. It can't be the only thing you have. I mean, within reality.
Yeah. And I think also too, you kind of got to consider the broader context. Maybe maybe you're getting into tech just for money, but you need to support a family and your parents or something. There's a reason why you need a bunch of money.
Right. Right.
And that's cool, man.
It
That's
is.
fine. Like,
It is.
You know, you make that sacrifice. I think that's very, like, you know, noble if you do it just for the money because you're trying to get out of some certain situation.
100% agree.
Even if you're only getting into programming because you want to get into Google and make $300K a year and you're only doing it for the money, whatever, man. I mean, yeah. Why not? Do it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Do it. I think daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, you got to ask yourself, can I continue with the same desire? How does it change over time, right? Because the thing is I'm getting into in for the money today. I'm not passionate, but I'm in it for the money. Well, in a day from now, can I say the same thing? A week from now, can I say the same thing?
Good point.
I mean, a month from now, can I say the same thing? 6 months from now, I say, fuck the money. This is hell. I'm out. It's just like that.
Yeah, you got to reevaluate.
You got to iterate, man.
Yeah, you got to iterate.
What we're talking about is this. Here's what we're talking about. There's really no such thing as a mistake. There's something happens and an outcome. What do you do with the outcome? Okay? You iterate. Change it. That's what code is.
Yeah.
You do something. Does it work? Maybe. I mean, Viagra was invented based on some heart thing, right? It was kind of the side. It wasn't. That wasn't even the intention. You know, it wasn't meant. Nobody was set out to cure ED, right? But what happened is they were doing experiments on drugs and stuff for like hearts or something. I don't know. You'd have to research it. And they came up with Viagra. It's something happened. They iterated, and there's your product. That's your life, man.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, and I think that segues into the next thing I want to talk about, which is getting started as a programmer, right? When you're brand new to coding and you're brand new to the tech industry, it's really overwhelming to figure out where to start because you want to, like in your head, you want the most optimal experience. You want to study the right things that are going to get you the right job. But the reality is, it's not going to turn out like that. You're going to start with something, and then later down the road, you're going to, an iteration's going to happen. You're going to realize, okay, I don't want to do this, or I shouldn't go down this path for whatever reason. And it turns into something else, right? But the most important part is that you take action and you start doing whatever that thing is in front of you.
I agree 100%. Yeah. If you want to get started in coding and you don't know where to start, find a meetup. Find a group of people that are writing code. Find a community college. Find people who are doing the same things, right? Meetups, .NET groups, whatever your code is. That's another thing too. Where do I get started? The thing is you can't rule out luck. You have to take action, and then you have to watch and see what happens, because what you want, the universe wants. It will show up. That's been my experience. It really has. I take a step forward and stuff starts running at me. It just comes out that way. Doesn't happen overnight though. Mm-hmm. It's like your 401k and the compounding interest, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually it works its magic. Mm-hmm. As long as you have the desire and you keep doing the work. Suit up, show up, do the work, find people, and try to make it enjoyable.
What was the first tech you started with?
The first tech?
Yeah. You started back in the 80s, but what was the very first tech you learned when you went back to school in like 2004?
Visual Basic.
Visual Basic? That's the first thing I learned too in high school.
VB6 in 2000. And then they were like, well, it's going to be .NET pretty soon, and this will be outdated. And then when I went back in 2006, college, right? It was Visual Studio 2005, and it was Visual Basic, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to kind of hammer in. The first tech is not going to be your last.
No. I mean, I knew Visual Basic. The guy who hired me just on my enthusiasm because I was stoked about it, and he was a great guy. He's like, well, Visual Basic's like C#. We do C#. You're going to have to learn C#. I was like, cool. I'll do it.
Yeah. Was it hard to learn?
Yeah. Yeah, man, I'd go there the first couple of days going, oh, my God, I can't believe they hired me. And I'd look at how much they're paying me and going, well, okay. Like, yeah. But it was hard to learn, but here's the deal, man. People were there. They showed up. They worked with me. They guided me. They helped me. And I learned. And I kept my tenacity and my persistence and my enthusiasm, okay? And that's what got me through. Persistence and tenacity and enthusiasm. You could trade in all your intelligence and knowledge and theory, and you can get by in this life with those three things, man. Yeah. Did I say three, or how many did I say?
There's three.
some
Persistence, tenacity, some other
enthusiasm.
stupid shit.
It sounds dumb. You have to just be stoked about it, you know?
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, so you start with Visual Basics. You got your first job. He said, yeah, we're not doing VB, we're doing C#, so this is what you got to learn.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand that. I tell people, if you're going to pick COBOL as your first language, like whatever, man. It's something that'll get your foot in the door and kind of expose the rest of the path.
Yes.
I don't recommend COBOL at all, right? But if that's what you want to start with, I mean, hey, that's a good start. You're probably not going to find a job, but that's going to give you exposure to coding and kind of get the ball rolling.
Yep. Yeah, if you got a mainframe in your basement, why not write COBOL?
So you got your first job in 2008 or 2009?
2009.
Writing C#.
C#,
He told you, all right, this is where you're going to be writing, and you had to spend a lot of time learning.
Yes.
Do you think college prepared you enough?
It prepared me enough to know what Visual Studio was. No, honestly, quite honestly.
They tell you Visual Studio in college?
Well, I mean, I worked in college. Back then you could get, Microsoft would give you like free versions, right?
Yeah.
And you get beyond Hello World and you do the usual stuff, you know, the data types, integer, string, array, Boolean, and then, you know, there were little projects, whatever. But no, it didn't. I didn't know what, source control was, right? I didn't know what a pull request was. I didn't know what a frickin' merge was, right? I didn't know what those things were, right? I didn't have any idea what any of that stuff was, let alone database. Yeah. Well, I knew a little about that, but...
There's like a disconnect from what you learn in school versus what is applied on the job.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, security, you know, all that stuff, you know. Are you in the cloud? Where does your hardware live? Is it on premise? Is it in the cloud? Back then it was all on premise. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, you don't know anything about that, and people are talking about it, and you're going, what? What?
Yeah, that's kind of what happened to me. I wasn't really familiar with I knew what source control was, but I didn't know how to properly use it. I didn't know merge requests or pull requests were a thing until my first job.
Yeah.
I feel like institutions are getting better at teaching students real world applications. Mm-hmm. I know coding boot camps do a pretty good job of that as far as I'm aware, but I also know that a lot of college curriculums kind of skip that.
Well, you know, I feel like there's a huge transition. I mean, quite honestly, this is kind of like, I don't know, 100 years ago, 120 years ago, there was a lot of, back when I was growing up, there was a lot of older guys who'd be like, or people would say, I was a self-made man, right? I didn't go to college. Well, you could do that, right? You could step on an assembly line and make a good living and support a family and have a pension and retire, you know? Uh-huh. You could do that kind of thing because there were production type jobs and the economy was different, right? And you could do those things, okay? You can do that today in the tech world, right? It can be done. My point is, and there's a lot of real good examples with a little bit of know-how and a little bit of internet and passion and tenacity and persistence. You don't need to go to college to write code. Mm-hmm. And that's huge. So there's a gap between what you can learn in college and what works in the real world. I guess arguably there is in any business, but I think more so with tech.
Yeah. Do you work with anyone who's like self-taught?
I would have to say they're all self-taught to some degree. You know, to get into the job that I have, I needed a degree. A lot of times to get into the private sector, right? The idea is like we want a 2-year degree and experience, or a 4-year degree and no experience, this kind of thing. I ended up having the 4-year degree with no experience, right? So to some degree, when you come in, if you're a developer, say you started 5 years ago, what you're doing today got nothing to do with what you were doing 5 years ago, let alone actually like 2 weeks ago sometimes, right? So they're self-taught to that degree. But to get it...
Because you're always learning.
You're always learning. Yeah, so to some degree they're self-taught. I don't know anybody who is rawly self-taught. That is, they didn't get a degree. Gotcha. I think most people I work with or know of and they've gotten a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, and that's how they've gotten into the sector I'm in, right?
Yeah, and I think there is something to be said about getting a degree is more of a I would say it's probably more of a sure bet. Even though I don't have a degree, I think it's probably more of a sure bet that once you're done learning, that you will be more likely to find a job, right?
Yeah.
I went to college for 3 years before I realized I wanted to just start working full time. I say 3 years, but I actually had 3 years left to do because I had to a lot of my credits from community college didn't transfer to university. Also, too, I was going into a lot of debt. There was a lot of reasons why I decided to drop out and work full time. But ultimately, I'm happy I did because I would have went in way more debt. Anyways, I feel like college provided me a lot of value, even though I hadn't taken any programming classes. No, matter of fact, I took one programming class, but this was already when I already had my first job as a programmer, right before I dropped out. But I basically didn't take any programming classes in college. But the biggest thing that helped me in college was networking. College provided me with a lot of networking events. I met a lot of companies in the industry because we would host like career fairs and mock interviews, and I would go to all of them. I would go to all the networking stuff. The reason why I got my first tech job is because I networked and I knew people. You know what I mean? And I think that if you're going to be self-taught, networking is important.
I agree 100%. One of the things about college is you are grouped with people that are like-minded. The idea is to better themselves through education. And when you take a class to do with programming, you meet people who ultimately will become programmers, right? A percentage of them. And what also, too, is you learn how to be yourself around people, how to communicate properly.
Yeah.
Okay? We're talking about all the different codes and, tech and so on and so forth. The real tech, the most important tech, especially today, is the people code. How do you deal and interact with people? Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah, you need to know the tech and you need to know what you're talking about, but how do you communicate? How do you collaborate? When you've been working in close quarters with somebody and, you're not seeing things eye to eye, how do you get through that, maintain your creativity? So what I'm saying is, you learn how to act around people, how to be around people. And that's key, okay? Because that's important, And I know that a lot of the stereotype for a lot of developers is introverted. They just want to write the code. They don't want to talk to people. And that's fine. I get that. There's a big part of me that is like that, okay? But at some point, you have to be able to communicate. You have to communicate to developers, you have to communicate to the leadership, and you have to be able to communicate at a higher level.
Yeah.
So there's an important thing to realize is if your strong point isn't tech, if you're not the tech guru, if you're not the guy solving the problem, or you're always the hero who figured it out, that's okay. Mm-hmm. That archetype is important, and you need that. And those guys are juggernauts. But the girl or guy or the person who can communicate in a team and inspire people, right? And be there and kind of be the person who collaborates better, right? And can understand, who can maybe ask a question that somebody else can't. Those are all important too. So you can have people skills. What I'm talking about is, in the technical world, you can have the intuitive communication skills that's not set a high value on. When you go to the interview, it's like, how fast can you do this? And how can you figure it out? And how smart are you? And how can you get the code done? That's important. But how about this? How about if you've been working on a project for 3 weeks and it's stagnant? How do you get that group of people back inspired and on task? You don't take a test for that when you do an interview, okay? Because that's just, how do you do that? In college, that experience, or in any group, right? Because you can arguably get that without spending $50,000 a year or whatever the crazy number is, right? If you get with like-minded people, that's kind of my point. Yeah. I didn't mean to go off tangent on that, but that's kind of it.
That's a good point. You got to, if you're not going to go to college, I think it's important to be around, when you're first learning, try to be around people and try to learn how to collaborate and communicate. And in this remote environment that we live in, you don't even have to meet up with them in person. You can go on, there's platforms like Discord, you can find communities.
Listen, that's
you can do it all online.
That's right. That's right. I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just had a thought. I mean, come on. You don't need to go to college to be in tech. You know how I know that? You know? Bill Gates. Thank you. I mean, come on. You might need a dad with a lot of money, you know.
Bill Gates went to Harvard, though, didn't he?
He did for a minute,
Yeah.
you know. And then there's the whole, you know, what was the Windows platform? What was that? What's the core with the old Windows? I forgot.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. He kind of. Anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But you don't need to go to college to be in tech, you know.
Yeah.
Example, Bill Gates.
You don't need to. I think it will require a bit more. Like, it will require a good amount of effort.
You're going to need connections.
You're going to need connections. You're going to need to put in a lot of work.
Well, here's the deal. Is you go out of your way, right? And you try to plan for everything. You put into work. You get connections, so on and so forth. One thing you rule out is luck. In the moment luck. Those are the things that make you.
Yeah, man. I mean, a lot of interviews kind of boil down to your interviewer and if they like you and, you know, if their ego's in check.
That's right.
You know what I mean? One thing that I think and I kind of know to be true, at least in your average programming job, is if you're a person with average technical ability, but you have exceptional communication skills, I think most people would prefer to hire you over somebody who has exceptional technical skills but very poor communication skills.
I would agree with that.
I don't think that is always true in, you know, in every job, like big tech maybe. I think, you know, if you want to get a job at Google, you know, Facebook, any of these big tech companies, you probably need to be exceptional in both. But most programming jobs, you know, if you have an average ability, but if you have exceptional communication skills, I think you'd be more favored to get a job, man.
Right. That is definitely a rarer archetype because you have a lot of folks who are exceptionally good with the code. Mm-hmm. In development, the archetype of the communication is a little rarer.
Yeah.
You know, but then at the same time, there are other. You can know code, but that may not be your main source of work. And you could change and become, you know, a delivery lead, a product owner, someone who talks to the customer, where you can talk to a technical person and a non-technical person. You can be an evangelist to some degree.
Yeah, there's a role for like coding evangelists nowadays.
Yeah.
It's called developer advocates.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking about code if it's the way that I want to do it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to be forced to like go to presentations and talk about stuff that I didn't want to do.
I get it. You know, the thing is it comes down to what's your frequency. Like, do you like rock? Do you like country? Do you like R&B? You know, do you like rap? What is it? You know, you and I will arguably listen to different music. I'll listen to something and you'll listen to it with me and go, yeah, that's pretty good. But it's not, you're not going to have the same playlist I would. It's your frequency, man. What are you in tune with? You just follow that.
So like going back to being an average developer but having exceptional communication skills, I think a lot of people feel like they need to be exceptionally talented to get, you know, just a regular coding job. And I really don't think that's the case. I think like the market we're in right now is absolutely insane. It's been insane for the last 5 years. It's more insane than ever, right? And there's a need for just average programmers working at, you know, average companies, but getting an average programming job working at an average company, because we're in such a high demand field right now, those jobs are going to pay more than just your average job, right? Like the average salary is about $50K a year or something, but in tech, the average programming salary is about $90K a year. You know, it's almost double, man. I don't think you have to be exceptionally talented to have a successful career as a programmer. Matter of fact, I'm going to say that you can be pretty average and have a pretty good career as a developer.
I agree. You know what it comes down to is there's a lot of folks who are architects, whereas they can actually come up with really cool ways to design code, right? And the thing is what you're describing, and for an average developer, if they can follow a pattern and they can reproduce that pattern in other areas, I'm talking about copy, paste, change it to what you need in a smart way, right? Then I think then you have something, right? It's kind of like the the person who develops the assembly line, that's got to be hard to figure out. But the person who works in one part of the assembly line or all the parts of the assembly line can be easily trained to follow that pattern. That's what you're describing. That's what we're talking about. So if you go back to the model of the way things were with production in terms of the way things used to be or whatever, where the average person could get a decent job, it's the same thing here. And you can rely on that. Now, you may in that averageness, right, where you're following a pattern, where you're doing something that someone else kind of conceived of, you may see a better pattern, collaborate with the architect, and eventually you become the architect. Or you may be a better communicator, and you may go in a different version, but it gets you in the door.
Yeah.
If you've got the clean code that's a repeatable pattern that's easy to understand, if it's set up that way, it's turnkey. People can step in and start doing the work. I've experienced that.
I think what you're kind of describing is like you enter the door as maybe average, whatever that means, but you put in the work and you grow that skill set and you become a master in that craft.
You walk in the door. The day you walk in, you add value.
Yeah.
And from there, you figure out what you're going to do.
You got to be open-minded. You got to be willing to put in the work.
That's right. That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, you got to kind of check your ego at the door. You got to be willing to admit when you're wrong, when you don't know. I think that's one thing a lot of developers struggle with.
Yeah.
They struggle with saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's always some convoluted like, oh, well, technically, it could be blah, blah, blah. And they go in this like technical rant where they're talking in circles and it doesn't make sense because they're basically saying they don't know, but they don't want to admit it.
Right. I was going to bring that up, right? You ask a technical question and they say, the way I read it, it's like this. And then they do essentially what you said. I've done that because I've been asked. That's correct. One thing I've learned from some old developers that are just amazing, okay? It's okay to say this. I don't know. Or, do you understand that, Ken? Are you with us? No. Could you explain it again?
Why is it so hard to say no for some people?
Well, because let me just put it this way, okay? When I first started getting into the technical world, I would go to these meetups, and some person would be showing a tech that was just amazing, and people would be asking questions, and they seemed smart, and I'd just sit there and go, I have no fucking idea what this guy's talking about, but then how'd you like it? I loved it. It was great. Thanks for explaining it. I had no idea. You have to say, I don't understand, and guess what? When you say that, there's probably 3 or 4 other people in the room that don't either. It's okay to not know. If you've established yourself as someone who's willing to do the work and try and has gotten past I don't know to I do know and I own it, then they'll tell you why you don't know. And you have to be able to explain it. And that's the difference to the architect, if they are a good architect, won't say just look at the code and you'll figure it out. They'll actually explain it to you in easy terms that you can understand.
I think if you start as a programmer and you're at, the average level and there's someone who's a little above average, right? But you kind of leave your ego at the door and you admit when you don't know and you're always curious and always willing to learn, right? But this person's super stubborn. They're the stubborn developer and they don't want to admit when they're wrong or they don't know. After a year, 2, 3, you're going to slowly surpass that guy and be a more valuable person or a more valuable developer.
I agree. I agree, and it's important to remember all the time that what you said I agree with 100%. Let me just add a little bit to it. We are both those people.
Yeah, you're right.
So
you're right.
Once we get there, if you can get there,
you're right, man. Yeah.
In the heat of it, we're both those people.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I still to this day, like, I don't want to, when I don't know something and someone is asking me, I don't want to say, I don't know.
Right. I mean,
especially the further I progress in my career, I feel like I should be at the next level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. So we're both those people.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
You got to check your ego. You got to keep your humility. It's all, and then you got to check yourself. You got to re-look at it. And you just got to work on it. And sometimes you're just aware of it, but you don't do anything. And that's a beginning. Anyway, I think we're both of those people.
I totally agree. So you're 58. What do you see your tech career kind of turning into the future? Do you still want to stay heads down in the code? Do you want to step outside that role and take on a more, managerial, scrum master, some type of role like that?
That's a great question. And that question is changing. And I honestly don't know at this point. And here's why. Because it's work from home now. It's on the internet. How do you have a culture, right? What you just described, when there's foosball and beer on tap and, meetups afterwards or whatever, right? The whole thing 3-4 years ago that was a perk, right? Come see my foosball and it's collaborative and yada, yada, right? Which is fine. It was awesome. Mm-hmm. That has turned into, you can work from home. That's your perk, right?
I think that's the best perk of them all, man.
So where does leadership fall? How valuable are those how the leadership jobs are? I guess there's a conversation around, do I need to be in the code to some degree? Here's what I see for myself. The coding is not my strong point. My dry time is slow. I'm not the guy who figures it out and gets it done the fastest by a long shot. So I'm not the guy to go to on the code, okay? I'm not the guy to figure out and fix the fire. I'm not going to put the fire out quick. You're going to go to 2 or 3 other people. However, this kind of thing, encouraging, building up, supporting, right? Just being a human, is easy for me, because I've been doing it for so long. And I see the pattern, the human pattern. What I'd like to do is I'd like to at some point be an evangelist, an agile coach.
Yeah.
Something that gets beyond the code, right? The code is the job that you do. You're digging in the dirt. You're chopping wood and carrying water. You're doing it with other souls. And that's the beauty of it. When you think back on a good experience you had in a job, you're not going to remember the thing that you were doing. You're going to remember the people, And the truth is that I really fall in love easy with people. I don't know any other way to say it.
Yeah.
So I see myself as providing enthusiasm and encouragement to people and supporting them and building up in that way. I'd like to see something like that happen.
Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. And
we'll see. But I can still do the code.
I think that's natural for a lot of people in tech. They slowly, you've been writing code for almost 15 years now.
Yeah.
No, wait, 13 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you slowly transition into a more person-facing role, I think that's just the natural path. I think you embrace that.
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of people embrace that. I think for a lot of people, they start out as a regular developer, they get promoted to senior, then principal and staff, and then IT manager, and now they're managing the whole department, and they're not in the code, but they would rather be in the code.
Yeah.
I think for you embrace the idea of transitioning out and shedding that old skin.
In my heart, I'm an engineer. I need to be close to the motor. I need to be close to the mechanism. Don't get me too far away from the motor. I don't need to, fix the valve or whatever. I understand how it works, okay? But I need to be close to the engine room, and I need to be close to the people that are operating the engine, right? Like on Star Trek, Scotty. I need to be part of that deal. I need to be communicating to the people who are driving the boat or the ship or whatever, okay? But I need to understand it still. That's very important to me. You follow what I'm saying?
I get you.
Yeah, that's important,
You still want to be involved in the code base.
That's right.
Okay.
To some degree.
Okay. Thank you for sitting down with me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can get value out of this conversation.
Yeah.
But it's been great, Dad.
Yeah. No, this has been amazing, man. I could go all day. We'll do it again real soon.
Absolutely. All right. That's going to be it. Signing off. Thanks, everybody. All right, man.
All right. Is that a wrap?